Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and in this series we dig beneath the surface to uncover what's really happening inside the Black Soldier Fly industry. Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and today I have with me a guest from a company I met when on my world travels last year. He is the co-founder of Marula Proteen, based in East Africa. And this is really interesting because of the way that they have set up their business. We'll go into the detail in the pod, but my perceptions of what the guys have done with this business is that I think they've actually worked it around what the Black Soldier Fly can do and have also fit this into their local region. So listen on if you want to hear more. It's a really interesting setup, and I'm super excited to introduce to you the CEO of Marula Proteen, Tommy Hooft. So, hey, Tommy, good to have you on the
Hello,
pod.
David.
Tell me your journey about how you've become a leader in the Black Soldier Fly world.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the podcast and for shining a light on the industry. I think it's very much needed. You know, the industry's been going through so many changes. It's still a very young industry, and the more information we have out there, the better. And I'm very excited to listen to the other guests and learn from them as well. Let's see, the journey. Okay, the journey started in 2018. I was fresh off of my bachelor studies, studying business, and I had a vague idea that I wanted to go to Africa. We grew up in Nigeria, so I lived there until I was 10. So I did have a sense that I wanted to go back. And I had a vague sense that I wanted to work in agriculture because I loved cooking. That was about it. And then this was at the time with my ex-girlfriend, and we had an amazing opportunity. Basically, we were bachelor students and we wanted to do a gap year. And we sent a very cheeky email to the CEO of JDE. JDE is Jacobs Douwe Egberts, which is one of the largest coffee conglomerates in the world. They rival Nestle in size. And the cheeky email was simple. It said, you guys make loads of claims about farmers, but we can't find any proof. So send us into the field and we will be the proof using photo and video evidence. We were invited to their Amsterdam headquarters. Then we bluffed super hard that we could make a documentary. They believed us. And then they sent us to Uganda. We set up a company so we wouldn't be liable for anything. Went to Uganda, made a documentary about coffee, grew that documentary into business. And it was actually through the learnings of coffee farmers that we wanted to give coffee farmers a second or third income. And then I read an article about Black Soldier Fly, was obsessed. And then, through that obsession, reached out to the Dutch government, won the first grant, and then started the Black Soldier Fly company, all in the pursuit of giving coffee farmers a second income. That's kind of the premise of how everything accidentally came to be.
Awesome. So, real organic story, I'd say. And tell me then, what exactly does Marula Proteen, or should we call it just Proteen for simplicity?
Proteen, yeah.
What does your company do in East Africa?
Yeah, perfect. So we have made changes over time, but starting with the end in mind, what we do is we compost organic waste, mostly coffee pulp and avocado oil waste. We feed it to the Black Soldier Fly larvae. We allow them to digest it, and then we compost the larvae inside their own manure, producing a fertilizer. So we're composting using Black Soldier Fly, to put it simply.
Okay, interesting. So your company name Proteen, yet you don't actually use the insects as protein. That's funny.
Yeah.
You're focusing purely on the Frass. That's, in my view, it seems like a world first company purely focusing on Frass rather than the protein. The heralded protein is not being looked at by you. So I find that really interesting. And how exactly did you come onto that model? I understand you've pivoted a few times to get to where you are now.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. We've been going back and forth about the name. Indeed, like all Black Soldier Fly companies, we started by producing protein. We had a big youth angle, hence the name Proteen. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we still do very much, but indeed I mean, the Frass does incorporate protein, but it's a bit far-fetched, but we have brand recognition in the region. So I think for now we'll keep it. But how it came to be is that, okay, internally, I would say internal and external forces. I would say that, and I can assume that people know a little bit about the process of black soldier fly. When you feed the larva the waste. If you want to grow fat larvae, you have to not just feed them waste, you have to feed them a diet. So you have to formulate a certain diet. Instead of being in the waste industry, you are more in the livestock industry. So you have to formulate your diets. You have to get, we were using municipal waste, but you have to get certain amounts of municipal waste and mix it perhaps with other dry substances to control the moisture level so that the larvae grow healthy and fat in a period of 7 days so that you can optimize it and then harvest them. So that's one thing. So you're in the diet game, not just in the waste game. Then you're looking at harvesting. So harvesting at scale is difficult. You have to separate the larvae. You have to wash them. When you're done with that, you have to dry the larvae. They have an exoskeleton. They don't like being dried. So there's quite high energy costs of drying them. So these are internal factors, right? So about 70% of our costs went to the production of larvae as animal feed, but we're getting about 50% of the revenue. That's one observation we were making. And then externally, the market for animal feed in East Africa, in this case, we started in Uganda, didn't appreciate the premium benefits of larvae compared to the alternatives, which was small silverfish from Lake Victoria, soybean, maize, or even imported animal feed. And it was really hard to compete on price because there was such a small market for premium animal feed. So these two factors got us frustrated, let's say. And then there was a coincidence, a little eureka moment born out of frustration. As I mentioned, we were linked to the coffee industry and we were using coffee pulp, always using coffee pulp, trying to prove that we can turn coffee pulp into larva feed and fertilizer. And one day we were looking at the larvae. They were growing slowly on just coffee pulp because it's low nutrient value. And then we just said, screw it. Like, let's just leave the larvae inside. Let's just compost them inside, see what happens. And we did. It turned out to work. It worked really well, right? So they digested everything. You had a really nice frass. And then, we knew about the benefits of chitin. And we started looking at that more and more. It was kind of a frustrated accident to make what we call supercharged frass. And after that, the cogs were spinning and we're like, okay, what does this look like? How can we do that? And that's what we pursued.
It was your eureka moment, right? And
Yeah.
I've written about this model in my blog before, and the way I see it, it's the coffee farmer goes to the wash station to drop off his season's harvest. And instead of him trudging back thinking, oh God, am I going to be able to grow this again next season? He's taking some frass or supercharged frass back with him to supercharge his own coffee trees and produce more for next year. So then the wash station has more coffee to distribute around the world. And they've also got this story to tell all of their global customers about their premium Rwandan or Ugandan, wherever it's from, coffee, and saying, look, we've got no waste because we're processing it and giving it back to the farmers. And how many other coffee producers around the world can stake this sort of claim? That's where I see the power in it. And actually, in a way, you may be selling the frass, but you're providing a service, and it's a waste valorisation service. And look, correct me if I'm wrong, that's how I see it. And it's when I made the introduction to this podcast, that's where I think it's offering real innovation in black soldier fly, and it's fitting into local regions and what agriculture is there and how are the business economics. So what exactly do you do to the frass, and what is the nutrition output when you incorporate the larvae into the frass or compost it into the frass, as you've explained? Does it improve the nutrition, and what do farmers say? What are your customers saying?
Yeah, perfect. No, before I just want to mention one point that you highlighted, which is really key, and it really drives our passion. You said it really well. Is that in this case we work with washing stations, coffee washing stations. All around the world, coffee washing stations are always located near rivers so that they can dump their waste in the river, and they'll dump their solid waste and it leaches into the groundwater. There's a lot of water waste that comes out that goes into the rivers. And this is the service that you're mentioning, right? It's making coffee circular, and it's something that drives us very much. And it was also our original promise to JDE, which we will and are still fulfilling. But yeah, I do love that. I love that point that you can actually claim circular coffee and that the farmer gets the value, because the farmer sells their coffee cherries to the company. They only get paid for the bean, but the cherry itself has value as well, but they'll never get that back. So
And
yeah,
so
I like that.
what is the, sorry, I'll park that question you've
Yeah.
just asked, but if we're talking about the cherry and it's the moisture in
Mm-hmm.
the cherry or the extra nutrients in the cherry,
Yeah.
what is it made up of, and how are you actually taking value from the bit that previously didn't have a value?
Yeah, fair. So if you look at a coffee cherry, red coffee cherry, there's always two coffee beans in every cherry. And the waste itself is about 60% of the volume. So it's quite significant. So the actual cherry flesh is more volume than the beans itself. Like nutritionally, it has quite high nitrogen content, for example, compared to avocado. But it is important that it comes back to the soil in a way that's valorized, and importantly in a way that's accessible to the farmer, because some washing stations, the farmers can pick up the waste and they'll basically bring a wet bag of wet pulp and they can spread it over their coffee trees. But what happens is it'll cake up and harden and kind of turn into a mulch rather than a fertilizer. And because the larvae do the pre-digestion, do all the hard work, let's say, it absorbs into the soil much, much easier. And yeah, this is how it should be, right? Like the farmer should get this value back, the value that they've brought to the washing station.
Absolutely, it's circular economy practiced.
Yeah.
Could the wash stations, if they didn't know about black soldier fly, could they compost the pulp, or is it just kind of not really viable?
They definitely could, and they should. One advantage then I would say about the process that we have is that the whole composting process takes about 26 days, and composting takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months depending on the conditions and if it's outside and etc. So we have a greenhouse based system, so you protect it from the rain. You have the greenhouse effect that helps significantly, but the larva digesting it, pre-digesting it, reducing the particle size, giving more room for bacteria to do their thing, increases the speed. And so you have 26 days, and because it's faster, it means you require much less space. And then also, the coffee washing stations, their business is buying and selling coffee. It's not fertilizer. And I think that's where specialization comes in and it matters.
Yeah, and it's my understanding as well that what black soldier flies do, like you've just said, is it speeds up composting process and it reduces biomass down by
Mm-hmm.
sort of maybe 50% around that, and 25% of that is frass and 25% of
Mm-hmm.
that is larvae in terms of weight. And so it dewaters, it reduces biomass, and it stabilizes, homogenizes into a really
Exactly.
good product. That's essentially what black soldier flies do, right? And that's how, and
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of, that's what you're doing and giving it
Yeah.
back to the farmers, and it's really good. Whereas, in Europe, if we talk about anaerobic digestion, that obviously valorizes nutrients as well, but it doesn't actually reduce biomass down. And so when you've got rivers leaching, as you've explained, it's because the biomass hasn't been effectively reduced down. But then comparing it to compost, it's just way quicker composting process and keeps a lot more of the nutrients inside of the products,
Exactly.
the larvae and
Yeah.
the frass. So yeah, kudos to what you're doing, Tommy. So going back to that question I asked 5 minutes ago,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
nutrition of both larvae and frass combined as a fertilizer?
Okay. So maybe, to talk about the benefits of the process, let's call it supercharged process and what it does. Okay. The larvae, they digest the waste, and we mentioned that, and then we compost the larva. So the larvae grow fat and then to adult size, and then at pupae, we compost them inside. So what you get is you maximize the chitin content in your frass, because frass always has some chitin content because they shed their skin, etc. But now we maximize the chitin content. And why is that important? So chitin is found in the exoskeleton of the larvae. But chitin is also the biopolymer found in the cell walls of fungus. And what Wageningen University is finding out is that when you put more chitin into your soil, so through the Frass, you enhance the fungal activity as well, because there's a chitin relationship between the larvae chitin and the chitin found in fungus.
And this
When
is
you
good fungal
yeah
activity, right?
yeah this is mycorrhizal fungus that you want to boost.
All the
So
good
when you
guys.
boost exactly yeah so when you
Yeah.
boost your mycorrhizal fungus, plants have a higher exchange rate of nutrients, right? Like every plant needs mycorrhizal fungus, and so that is a huge benefit. And another big benefit is that chitin kind of acts as a vaccine for plants, because what happens is it's part of your Frass, you add it to your soil, and then the dead insects triggers a response in the plants. And it's just like us when we get a vaccine, you get a little bit sick so that your body builds up immunity. It's the exact same thing with chitin. It builds up this plant immunity, exactly like how a vaccine works. So your need for pesticides is going to reduce as well, and your plant immunity will increase. So that's another huge benefit. And then in general, it increases microbial activity, which we need much more in soils. So these are the main benefits of the chitin beyond the faster composting process, like you mentioned.
Tommy, you're like the AstraZeneca of plant science,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
attacking
Yeah.
COVID-19 of plants.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Um, okay, cool. Now, we talked about, coffee producers around the world
Yeah.
always been located next to rivers, right?
Hmm.
And having problems with the waste as a result, because not
Hmm.
all coffee plantations or wash stations are huge conglomerates, right? A lot of
No.
them are localized stations. Can your can your system, in your view, be replicated outside of East Africa as a result? I mean, you've already talked a little bit about avocados being processed,
Hmm.
so that's already stepping out into a slightly different agricultural environment. Or
Hmm.
you could go to different countries to replicate your model in coffee. So, actually, I'll reframe this question: what's your growth strategy? And perhaps in your answer, you can talk a bit about financing as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So, like you've alluded to, like this is a decentralized model, and we can go as small as like, okay, in Uganda we have four factories, let's call them, 4 units. In Rwanda we have 2, and we've just expanded to Kenya. And we started with municipal waste, so that's one option. Then we pivoted to coffee, and now we do coffee and avocado. We have tested on very many different waste feedstocks. So, for example, in Uganda we've done water hyacinth, which is a huge plague, and it blocks the dams, and it's quite fibrous, but actually if you supercharge it, it works. It's good enough. The larva digests it, and again, the larva digest it. Like I mentioned, it's good enough, which means they don't grow extremely fat, but we don't care about that. We care about the fact that they digest it and turn it into Frass. We've done it on kelp. So in Namibia, I went to Namibia and we partnered with a company called Kelp Bloom. We've tested the supercharge on kelp. Again, very different properties. Of course, the kelp was washed a bit, so the salinity went down, but it also works on kelp. All types of animal manures. We've tested it on biogas digestate. At one point, we thought the biogas industry, for example, the Netherlands, it's quite wonky that you can't use the digestate, but if you turn it into supercharge, you change the properties, and it's more of a soil amendment, etc. So I think what you can hear where I'm getting at is that we can work with different types of waste sources. And the important thing is that we can use one single stream of waste. And I think that changes the game for black soldier fly. Because what we said in the beginning is if you want to make larvae for animal feed, you have to make a diet. And the diet, you have a composition of diet, and you have to have a certain moisture content and nutritional values so that the larvae grow juicy and fat. And in supercharge, you don't care about that. You can use a single stream of waste. And that means that you can co-locate with these factories. So with the avocado oil factories we work with in Rwanda and Uganda, we're very close. Like the one in Rwanda, we're 800 meters away from the, and that's because we can just use that source of waste. So in terms of growth, that is the plan. The plan is to work with the raw material provider. And when I say work with, like in Rwanda, it says it's as close as a joint venture. So we have a joint venture with the avocado oil company. In Kenya, it's just a service provider contract. So we get paid to pick up the waste and valorize it. And I'm sure that from the legal business model, there's more models than just joint venturing. So I think licensing, for example, it could work if it's beyond our reach. But I really like the joint venture model because eventually a lot of black soldier fly companies run into this problem is that you still rely on your raw material, and the people that own their raw material will eventually try and valorize it sooner rather than later. So might as well work with them. And then the other part of the growth strategy is, of course, financing, right? Like we have significantly reduced the capex need because most of our capex need now is concrete and greenhousing and some shredding. And of course, at scale, this is still significant. So to give an indication, in Kenya, where we bought 10 acres of land, and the goal by mid next year is to do 4,000 tons of waste a month, which is 1,000 tons of fertilizer. This is all avocado oil waste. And you are looking at a capex need of roughly $1.1 million. And of course, this is the first plant in Kenya. So I'm sure in the future, the cost would go down. But just to give an indication, and we have historically, I think like most black soldier fly companies, been financed by grants. And now we have a private equity partner who's going to help us with that.
Okay, and is that the preferred method of expansion, private equity rather than grants, or are you going to still keep it mixed up?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was cool enough to say that we can just go private equity and finance ourselves with our own, internal revenue, etc. But no, the truth is we will use grants, and we are going to use grants. And I hate sounding like this because it makes us sound ungrateful for the support that we've received, which is not at all the case. Without the grants, we wouldn't even have started. There was absolutely no chance that we would have been able to start. Like, it was first the Dutch government, and then it was JDE, which basically gave us a grant. It was more of an invoice. And then we had other partners here and there that have really, really helped us. And I do think that, especially in East Africa, it covers the cost of doing business. There's so many inefficiencies and crazy things that happen that you can't predict, that I think the grants cover. But I'm learning now, after, it's been 6-7 years of really being in the grants, is that, with most of our grant partners, we never had the conversation of hardcore profit, like just pure profit. Like, you have to make your company profitable. And it's taken us a long time. And even now, like, we're only profitable in season, so in the rain season, but not yet outside of the season, right? So, we're not yet net profitable at the end of the year, but getting close. And it's not an excuse, but I do think that our mindset wasn't geared to just hardcore profit. It was geared to how many jobs can we make, and how much waste can we valorize, or how many partnerships can we make, which is amazing, but that's not, at the end of the day, how you create an industry.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I've seen plenty of businesses that are too focused on the growth, the creating jobs and creating a nice big factory as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain merit to all of that, because you do have to prove a concept at the start. And so for that, you kind of need investment or grants or whatever it is to grow that. But at some point, you need to turn that cash injection of grants, of investment, into sales, because that's where it needs to be replaced by that, because that pot of money from sales, if done well, never runs out. Whereas the pot from government or private individuals, whatever it is, in terms of investment, that does run out at some point. And that is the point of them. So it's really good to hear you're in that transition phase, and saying that, you're profitable in season is a lot more than a lot of different companies around the world can claim. So good on you. I think, did you mention that the capex requirement was 1.1 million?
Yeah, so this is for our new operation in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So Kenya will focus on avocado oil waste exclusively, also just to get a uniform quality of the Frass itself, and because there's enough avocado oil waste in Kenya, indeed. So to valorize at least 4,000 tons, we're looking at about $1.1 million, and that's capex for everything, like from the trucks to the office to the land to mostly greenhousing and concrete and mixers and shredders and packaging lines and
Wow. Okay.
warehouses.
And when will that be up and running?
So we've completed our earthworks, and I'm pushing the team to start basic production mid-December. So if all goes well, we have at least the concrete floors ready and perhaps the greenhouse roof so that we can at least start composting. Hopefully we've already been collecting waste. So there's a huge pile of waste already on site, ready to be composted. Let's see, mid-December, we should check in again, and then it'll probably be January, but hopefully not.
Awesome. Well, get yourself a Santa Claus outfit and cut the ribbon of the new site open with your
nice.
with some sort of, I don't know what Santa Claus would cut it with, just scissors, I suppose. I want that. That's my target to you to aim for. That would be awesome. Or you could get Philip to do it anyway. And speaking of Philip, your co-founder, could you talk a bit about, you guys, how you guys met?
Yeah, definitely. No. So it's true. Like, I mean, this business would be nothing without Philip. Philip is my co-founder. We've worked together almost since day one. Like I mentioned, I made the documentary and the things in Uganda. And then the summer after that, I went to summer school for insects, for food and feed in Wageningen. And it was at the summer school that, you meet people, you start talking, and then someone told me there's this guy that, first of all, loves East Africa. He did his internship in Kenya. He met his now wife, girlfriend there, and he studied biosystems engineering with a specialization in black soldier fly. And specifically, his whole thesis topic was about how to weigh larvae, which I thought, just chuck them on a scale and weigh them. Turns out you can write a whole thesis about it. So, perfect ingredients. And then we also got along really well. And it's been a crazy ride. Like, we moved to Uganda in 2019. We were both finishing our masters before that. And then, a few months later, COVID hit. And as a business that relied on everything, that was interesting. Philip's wife quickly thereafter became pregnant. So we had that, plus the COVID, plus starting a new business. And it was cool, like he didn't have to, because he was about to do his PhD and said, screw it, let's try this business. And to start a business in Uganda for the first time together in a new industry with COVID happening and your wife is pregnant and still going for it, I think that's already amazing. So that was a little bit the start.
I found when my partner got pregnant, I found it was the best motivation I could ever have to get my life sorted. So
yeah. No, it's true. Like we always joke that Amelia, which is his daughter's name, is the reason protein exists. She's also exactly the age of protein, so we kind of measure protein's age with Amelia's age. Yeah.
So you need to credit her with something like call one of your production systems after her or something like that. I don't know.
Nice. Yeah. That's a good one.
So and so am I right in saying, well, he's the engineer and you're the business driving force?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that's well, it sounds like it's very complementary, but do you find that it works perfectly? Is there any other skills that you think you would need on the founding team, or is that where you kind of hire in?
Yeah, no. So I mean, in terms of complementary skills, it, like you mentioned, it works very well. Like I'm definitely a layman. I mean, for my master's, I did food and agribusiness management. In hindsight, would have been more useful to go more technical and go to Wageningen, but that's in hindsight. I mean, I love the subject. I love learning about it, and we also pivoted to Frass because we both are interested in soil. And, obviously Philip has the technical skills, but both of us didn't have a lot of work experience, right? So we are coming more from academic background into the business side. Yeah, we sometimes joke like I raise the money, he spends the money, and I sell tomorrow, he builds today, and it works perfectly well. I think the thing that we do really miss or have been missing in our founding team is someone that is just you have all these stereotypes of founders, and there's someone that's more like future oriented, always thinking about the vision. I would say that's where I lean towards, which is great, but you can also be stuck in that dream world. And then there's Philip, who's the engineer and building today, but that also means that sometimes you're worried about messing up today, right? So you want to make sure today is good, but
Mm,
sometimes you have to step into tomorrow, which is good, to have that push and pull. But what we were really missing is just a hardcore entrepreneur, like someone that is just relentless about making money. Like we were, which I think is a great thing, but we genuinely care about solving this coffee washing station issue and getting, fixing soil health, which is amazing. And you need that. But at the end of the day, and at the start of the day and at the middle of the day, like you are a business, and just
mm.
someone that's just hardcore relentless about money and just wants to make money. I think that's something that we've been missing. And I think the private equity player is already giving us that sense of urgency. Everything now is about targets and targets and targets, which I'm still getting used to, but it's good.
Yeah, I think you are bang on the money. From my experience, both speaking to loads of people around the world about black soldier flies and analyzing the industry, but also, trying to do it myself. And sales is a really, really undervalued and underappreciated skill that we need to have as business founders or entrepreneurs. I find in Western culture, at least, we laugh at salespeople. We find them annoying. They've got no dignity. They're sleazy. Yet we should be kind of celebrating them for all their skills of endeavor and perseverance. And like you said, that just insatiable drive to make money, because we can't do business without sales. And it's good that you've recognized this. So in summary, the three skills that you think key skills that you have here is that kind of business leadership and visionary. You've got the technical day-to-day engineering and operations, and then finally you've got the sales. Where do you think something like science and entomology fits into all of this?
Yeah, good point. I would say, okay, so I think if we talk about Frass, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to focus on Frass because I want to talk about the larva feed and how that was, but I want to focus on the Frass. And when we talk about entomology and science, I think we're a little bit early still in an industry that doesn't appreciate Frass. I think in general, we're still at a point where organic has a bad reputation, mostly because when you talk about organic fertilizer, you assume it's animal manures, which have really high application rates, poor nutrient value, and just has a bad reputation. At the same time, we've been, ruining our soils. Let's say degrading our soils, both with excessive chemical input and, chopping down all the trees and monocropping, etc. So I think there is a switch, but I think we're still early. And where science comes in is that, like, even just the vocabulary of being able to sell the product. Like we were talking about chitin earlier. There's not many agronomists that I speak to that know chitin, what chitin is, or let alone the benefits of chitin. So you can't even mention the big benefit. And we've been putting all of our eggs into the chitin basket, and then we've been making supercharged. That you're trying to sell supercharged Frass, and then you're like, chitin. People are like, what's your nitrogen content? It's always about NPK, right? They always want to know what's your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and conversation kind of ends there. When you start talking about micronutrients, they kind of care, but not really. And I find that difficult. So I think the role of science and entomology is, and this is also where we need help, from the industry at large, is translating that into the practical sales, like you just mentioned. There's the existing vocabulary of agronomy, and sure, a lot of it's outdated and universities and blah blah, but it is what it is. And then there's the new science and entomology, which we're part of, that have to come and marry and meet in the middle. I don't think we're there yet, and we need a lot of help to get there. I know that there's, like, for example, the Frass Institute, and there's guys around the world that are doing research on it. But when you go to the field and you try and sell your bag of fertilizer to a farmer, all they care about is how much does it cost? That's by far the biggest point. And then you're competing in an industry that's heavily subsidized. Like in Kenya, it's a 40% subsidy, and in Rwanda, it's a 50% subsidy. So you're competing against that as well.
For
Talking
what?
about,
Sorry, for the
sorry, for
chemical
synthetic.
fertilizer.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, yeah, for chemical. We see chemical as our main competitor.
Yeah.
Anyways, a bit of a tangent. Yeah, I think that's where science and entomology can come in. In the case of Frass is giving us vocabulary to sell the product to farmers.
Yes. And actually, if you're working with coffee wash stations and the farmer is already going to that wash station to drop off their product, they can pick up at the same time the Frass.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's localized, you don't have any transport costs. And if it's in the hills, those transport costs can be tricky, right?
Yeah,
So you've already got stolen a march on the synthetic fertilizers in that sense, right?
yeah. No, that's a good point. I think logistics is one. And then two, maybe I would love to touch on this is, the innovation of Frass. So yes, we started with making supercharged and you have a great Frass product. And, a little part of us was quite dogmatic about organic, but then, we were like scolding synthetics and, how bad it is and blah, blah. But the truth is it's always in the how and not in the what, and it's how it's used. Synthetic as is isn't necessarily terrible for soil. It's just that it's being overused and abused. And so we've been combining our Frass with organominerals like ammonium sulfate, like urea, but also organic inputs like rock phosphate and kieserite. That's also where we see the science coming together, like the best of both worlds, of the best of the synthetic and the best of the organic, putting them together, and actually you get a much higher nutrient uptake of your synthetics because of the organic matter and because of the chitin. Again, still hard to convince and translate that, but I think if we if we're patient enough and long enough breath, I think we'll get there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's kind of like the do you go vegan debate to save the world, or try and convince
Mm.
the population to become vegan, or is it better to talk about let's have more of a balanced diet of flexitarianism or just reduction or whatever, and it's all about balance. So
Mm-hmm.
that's good to hear from. Steering the conversation towards more the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start off by asking one question. If you could do one thing to the industry to expedite its and your growth, what would it be?
Yeah. So we just touched upon it, but if the industry would have either a database or a common vocabulary on the benefits of Frass, that would really help. And okay, so that's one thing, right? That's about, let's say, the translation and vocabulary and selling it. But then there's the other part of like farmers buy inputs on credit, and that's just the reality. So if you're selling a new product to a farmer, they would love to have it on credit. Most of our sales are now just cash sales, which, amazing. Thank God that Uganda has that capability at the volumes that we have. But if we want to scale up and expand, it has to be done through credit. I think that the means by which we could do that is to partner with the industry in which we're working with. So, for example, the coffee industry has the means to offer credit to farmers, but only if the benefits of, the Frass are very clear. And then I think that the coffee industry, for example, would only see the benefit if they can claim the carbon neutrality and the carbon benefit. So I think this is, again, for the wider industry. We don't yet have carbon credits because the claim on what is it, waste reduction is so low compared to, for example, biochar, that's not yet worth it, which is a shame because it would be amazing if this could be linked to Frass, to farmers, and all together.
Yeah, if you put some carbon back into
Yeah,
the soil as you are, and if you're proving that it's not leaching into the rivers or not
yeah.
evaporating, so to speak, into the air, then there should be a claim there. But perhaps, like you said, more research needs to be done. Could you,
Mm.
as a stepping stone into that, can you use it as a more of a sales play for those Jacob Dow Egberts to say
Mm-hmm.
to they launch a specialist coffee line around the world, which is carbon neutral coffee because it valorizes the waste and maybe other things as well, as more of a enhancing sales technique to then build your business. And
Mm-hmm.
then perhaps over time look at even a carbon credit scheme to bring more revenue into the economy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That'd be great, right? Like linking JDE to the specific coffee company work with on the ground to the farmer, and then the Frass and the carbon is kind of like the link that ties them all together. And then to monetize that and have the farmer benefit, have protein benefit, and then have JDE be able to claim the transparency and the carbon benefits. I think that would be huge. We recently won, talking about grants, we won a grant with EIT, the European something something.
Innovation something, or yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so from EIT Food, and it's actually in partnership with this big coffee trader, Sucafina. And our mandate is to get carbon credits, which means to do the whole certification verification to prove the carbon neutrality of the washing station, because we use both the wastewater and the solid waste, goes to the farmer. And so we are working on this, and we have to have it done by 2027. And then we can prove that we're the first carbon neutral coffee through black soldier larva. And then if we can link it to JDE or other big players, that would be amazing. For now, we're going to do a voluntary carbon credit. But of course, if we can link it to them, that'd be amazing. And then 2027 would be almost exactly 10 years after I started in Uganda. So it'd be a 10-year goal, to make the coffee value chain more sustainable, which was the original documentary. So maybe there will be a 10-year celebration there.
Now that's something that Starbucks could definitely get on board with, I'm sure. So again, talking about the industry, there is a lot of negativity in black soldier flies right now due to some significant failures of big players, I should say. Is there any lessons that you feel that you've learned from others in the industry, and perhaps actually lessons that you've learned from others that have done well?
Yeah, definitely. Like being inside the industry, the big players like Insect and Protix, it's true, right? They raised so much money, but they raised it on the novelty of the idea. And I remember 5-6 years ago when you could talk about black soldier fly and everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. It's going to solve the waste management problem and the protein problem and soil health all in one go. And of course, there is no silver bullet, which we also had to learn, because I was definitely convinced that we had found the silver bullet.
We've all been there, Tommy. We've all been there.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. There is no silver bullet, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, they were very secretive, and I remember this because I did my master's in France, and actually Insect came to visit and gave us a lecture, and I was hooked, of course, because I was already, busy with black soldier fly in Uganda, and they were doing mealworms, but still insects, and he was convinced. He's like, mealworms are the best. Why are you even talking about black soldier fly? But at the same time, quite secretive. And I think that was one thing. Protix, quite secretive. We also asked to visit them, and they've been notorious that they do a lot of research, but it seems to be in-house, right, for their patents and for their investors. Not to blame them. I understand why they did it, but for the industry, it's not a good thing. Then there's the waste, right? So neither Protix or Insect or these big players use negative waste streams. They use positive waste streams, right? So the waste that they were buying could be used to feed pigs, for example, right? So they were taking the waste away from another feed source. So it wasn't a negative waste stream. And I think that's a major issue if you're talking about black soldier fly. I think that the whole point of black soldier fly, what they're best at is digesting, consuming waste. They happen to have pretty good protein content, but there's other insects that have a better protein content, but what they're best at is the waste valorization. I think that's a big learning. Like, are you taking a negative waste stream? And then the energy costs. That's also why, if we talk about scaling up, we want to stay across the equator. We're still high in the mountains in the Coffee Arabica regions, where it gets quite cold, or relatively cold, below 20 sometimes at night, but it's good enough for the larva. And it means that we don't have energy demand, right? I think Protix, when there was the energy crisis in Europe, the business model didn't work anymore. So it's quite fragile. And then maybe to bring it down to a more local, regional level in terms of learnings, I would say that at some point we chose to be a Frass company and focus fully on Frass, and we'll see if that was the right gamble and pivot. Obviously we think so. We think there's space for that company in the industry. But before that, we were a breeding company. So after the animal feed, we pivoted to breeding, and we only produced eggs and baby larvae. And we thought that the region needed that. It did. We were too early, so the market wasn't ready for it. And then another player, a large player in East Africa, turned around that was buying our eggs, turned around and actually started offering us eggs. Which at first pissed us off, but it was actually very useful because now we buy their eggs and we don't breed anymore.
Hmm.
And we've had a bunch of other companies come up and sell eggs. So I think that's the learning, is like specialization. And it is hard because you can't just tap into let's say a waste industry here where you can just ask for someone to bring waste. So you do have to become kind of a waste company, and you don't necessarily have your eggs, but as much as possible specialize. And for example, you'd see Chanzi doing that really well. Like they're specializing in the waste aspect of black soldier fly, whilst also doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you've got a model that, by all its merits, could work in multiple different formats in different countries. So why would you then go and busy yourself with producing eggs or trying to sell protein or something? I know that's not your model, but then why would you do that? So specialization is absolutely key in this regard, and it's exactly how the industry should be developing as more people kind of are attracted to the industry, and that's one message that I'd like my listeners of this podcast to have is, look for all of those different gaps within your country. If there's not an egg producer, could you be it? If there's not someone who's actually providing technology for building the farm, could you do it? Or
Mm-hmm.
how can you attract more scientists into the area, or whatever it might be, and just creating a skills pool and dividing those up amongst different businesses or organizations.
Exactly. Or even like maybe just one thing to add, like we are now positioning ourselves as a manufacturer, but you can also be a distributor, right? Like we have to still do both, but we're trying to outsource distribution as much as possible because you can't do manufacturing at scale very well and also distribution at scale very well. They're just two completely separate businesses, which we're still trying to wrap our heads around, but we want to just become a manufacturer of fertilizer and make a really good product and then have other people distribute it. But I think that's also learning, like, again, not to do too many things at once, which is ironic because the black soldier fly is lauded as a multi-purpose, multi-use insect, so it's hard to not do that actually.
Yeah, right. I mean, this brings me to the end of my questioning. I don't know if you've got anything else to add before I close.
No, just that I really appreciate that you're putting this information out there. And like I would also maybe just to end with the washing stations and the coffee partners that we have worked with, especially Sucafina. I really appreciate the work that we can do with them. They took a chance on us, and I think the whole combination of JDE, Sucafina, that we can really prove for one crop, coffee in this case, that we can make it carbon neutral. And if we can do it for coffee, I'm sure we can do it for many other crops, avocado following that. Yeah, and for anyone that wants to enter into black soldier fly space, please do. Just because a few big players might have fallen, they have also kickstarted the industry and proven that there is big investment into the space. And there are so many companies that we have never heard of in India and China that are doing black soldier fly very effectively, very efficiently, and they are proving the model as we speak, and they're proving that it works.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, far and wide, this has been Tommy Hooft on the Black Soldier Fly Leaders podcast. Thank you very much.